Government of India has set ambitious targets for renewable energy. For instance, it's scaled up the target for solar from 20,000 megawatts by 2020 to 100,000 megawatts by 2020. And then we already have about 20,000 megawatts in wind, which will be scaled up to about 60,000 megawatts. And we're very privileged to have with us the Minister for Power, Coal and New and Renewable Energy, Mr. Piyush Goyal, to tell us more about investments into the sector. So first of all, we talk about these targets now. You've scaled up 100 gigawatts for solar itself by 2020. Currently, there are about 30,000 megawatts for all renewables. So when we look at, what you're trying to achieve, we're looking at some huge kind of figures for investment. Can you give us an idea of what we are talking about?
Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi is passionate about renewable energy. He believes it's our country's duty to leave behind a better environment for the next generation. He believes it adds to our energy security. And in that sense, we have received tremendous encouragement, tremendous support from him when we rewrote these targets and have taken up expansion of renewable energy in a mission mode. I think it's more in the mind to be able to accept targets to scale and then speedily execute it. Fortunately, the Indian manufacturers supported our efforts by withdrawing the anti-dumping duty request. And we see a renewed enthusiasm amongst both Indian corporates and international investors, both to expand manufacturing in India, which will create a lot of jobs, and to invest in the renewable energy space, where life cycle returns are very attractive.
So what kind of figures are we talking about investment? Because what I've read is that it costs about 7 crore rupees per megawatt for solar. We're talking about big investments. So are you looking at the big companies, or are you looking at, can the SME sector be the story for renewables?
It will be a mixture of all possibilities. We are looking at large investments. The investments will be not less than $100 billion in this sector in the next 5 years. We have a program where we are going to have a large component of rooftop solar, which will be spread all across the country, and people will become prosumers instead of just consumers of electricity. We also have a large component where we are trying to engage educated unemployed people to set up smaller off-grid solutions, which will service local areas, and the government will encourage them to come into the power production through solar energy. We have a large and ambitious program to try and get the small hydro back on stream. A lot of them are stalled at different levels. And towards this end, the government will act more like a facilitator. Government will bring in enabling policy so that this gets advantages of must-run status. There is a renewable power obligation on consumers of electricity. We are also introducing a new concept called renewable generation obligation. All those who set up new thermal plants or fossil-based plants will be required to compulsorily also co-invest in renewable energy. Our idea is that we as a nation are a responsible global citizen, and we wish to demonstrate that both by action and by our Prime Minister's passionate interest in renewable energy.
You said the government will act as a facilitator. What kind of incentives are you offering for the large investors? Because you also have, what is this, the $1 billion scheme? Can you tell us a little bit about these things?
Well, I think the government acts as a facilitator when it helps to provide the proper energy access and energy purchasing infrastructure. So we are bringing in net metering, for example. All the rooftops will have a net metering facility where they can consume electricity whenever they require it, and surplus electricity generated can be fed back into the grid. We're also looking if we can support some of these rooftop programs with interest subventions so that it becomes more affordable for the people. We are looking at setting up solar parks where the government helps to get the land in place, creates the evacuation facility through green energy corridors, effectively making it a plug-and-play program.
We are already the 5th largest installed wind power in the world, with about 22 gigawatts, but you say that we can scale up quite a lot in this field as well. What's the potential in wind?
Well, I think we can easily go up to 100 gigs in wind in the next 10 or 12 years. My concept is I'm talking to all the various states to see how we can encourage them to repower their existing wind installations. So we have new technology in the market now where we have larger wind turbines. Maybe some of the existing smaller turbines can either be replaced or supplemented with a larger turbine going up in the air above the existing turbine. We're also talking to states to have a uniform policy where all the states will make it much easier to set up wind farms. So get it easier to change the land use to power production, maybe even eliminate the requirement for change of land use, make it automatic, give it a must-run status, help them to feed into the grid. And we are also trying to create regional grids so that scheduling and forecasting of wind on the one hand becomes easier, and the absorption capacity of wind energy, which sometimes has disruptions in production and tends to affect the grid frequency. The moment we turn it to a whole regional grid, then the capacity to absorb becomes much better.
We've always been talking about India being bathed in sun, and there's such a lot of potential as far as solar is concerned. But when I look through, I see that a number of our units are very small in their capacity. Is this by design, or is it is desirable also to keep them small?
Well, I think there's place for all. We'll certainly need the small units for the off-grid or microgrid solutions to service the remote parts of India. The rooftops will obviously be small. But at the same time, the solar parks will have the ability to scale up. So we could have 1,000 megawatt being made at one place, maybe 500 megawatt. And that will bring in economies of scale. It will also help bring down the cost of transmission and distribution. We are also looking at combinations of solar and wind parks. So we have a very open mind. We are looking to learn from other countries' experiences. The Reinvest program coming up on the 15th of February, which Honorable Prime Minister will inaugurate, is a forum where the world's leaders in the renewable energy space are getting together. Probably one of those rare occasions when renewable energy is being given the thrust that it rightfully deserves. And these 3 days are going to be a learning experience for us, and also an opportunity to share India's ambitious plans with the rest of the world, with investors from around the world.
Well, waste to energy too has a lot of untapped potential, sir. Now, are the costs too high here, or because India, we look at our urbanization, for instance, we produce such a lot of waste.
You're absolutely right. Unfortunately, the Indian waste is yet not segregated into organic and biodegradable and plastic, and therefore historically experiments on waste to energy have not yet been very successful. A little bit more consciousness amongst the people, a little better management of our waste will help make this program also speed up. And we do have in mind certain plans which we'll work on in the days to come.
How dependent are we on imports currently for our technology, etc.? Specifically, what do we plan to do to reduce that, especially with the Make in India campaign?
It's a chicken and egg story. Manufacturers in India were not getting adequate business and therefore became uncompetitive. At the same time, we have the technology, we have the wherewithal, we have the technical skills and manpower to be able to make in India. So I believe once this project gets launched and is kickstarted to scale, and in the initial stage, there is a possibility we'll be more import dependent because India doesn't have manufacturing to that large a scale. But the moment you have visibility of this kind of scale of expansion, Indian manufacturers will become stronger. We already have a company which has assured to invest $4 billion in manufacturing in India during the Vibrant Gujarat Summit earlier this year. And I see this traction where Indian domestic manufacturers will scale up, will get better technologies from around the world, and will probably become the manufacturing hub of the world in the years.
So we will be exporting in the end, is what you're saying?
I do hope so.
And since states are involved, so how important is this interaction with states and the role played by Niti Aayog, for instance?
Well, I personally have interacted with almost all the major states in the country now, and I believe I have received very good cooperation. All states are conscious that they have to meet the aspirations of the people for affordable 24/7 power, good quality power. I believe when they start trusting you And they understand that you are there to assist and facilitate their own programs. You are there to support them to become a powerhouse or become energy surplus. Once that understanding comes in, I have found no difficulty in dealing with any states across the political spectrum with different ideologies. I'm very comfortable in my engagement with the states, and I'm getting very good support from them.
So what about financing? Are banks treating this as a priority?
I think the banks have had certain past experiences which were not very exciting. They are seeing our enthusiasm, they are seeing the government's commitment to renewable energy. I have on record certain concerns that the bankers have, which we'll also be deliberating on in the Reinvest conference, and come out with viable solutions. For example, in the past they have had some challenges with DISCOMs not paying up their bills on time. So we are talking to the states, we are trying to introduce a bankable power purchase agreement into the renewable energy space. Sure. Once net metering comes in, it becomes easier for the bankers to get their repayments of rooftop solar. So we are working to make bankers comfortable and ensure that they are excited to invest in renewable energy.
So we've talked largely about generation, and you did mention the grid a few times. How efficient is the grid as far as distribution is concerned?
Well, there are a lot of challenges which we have inherited. We do believe the transmission infrastructure in the country is inadequate to meet the needs of the future. We have not yet been able to give energy access to nearly 50 million homes, 67 years after independence, which is one of the priority tasks of Prime Minister Modi. And going forward, we believe an investment of nearly $50 billion will be made in the next 5 years. A lot of it is being supported by the central government through two new schemes, the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana and the Integrated Power Development Scheme, one for the rural areas, one for the urban areas, where we are going to support states in upgrading their sub-transmission and distribution infrastructure, introduce smart metering, bring underground cables in some of the high-density areas, replace some burnt-out transformers, give access to remote areas, and focus on segregation of distribution feeders, particularly to get the farmers adequate amount of power.
So when we're producing clean energy, we need to bring it into areas where there's high pollution as well. So in that regard, what are we actually doing? How efficient are we trying to improve the efficiency of vehicles, for instance?
Well, the Honorable Minister for Roads and Highways is already working on introducing tighter norms of efficiency of automobiles. We are also looking
electric
at
vehicles.
Sorry?
Where we can use these, where we can use renewable energy in vehicles.
That's true. That's a wonderful concept which I hope in the future will become more economically viable. In fact, I had called up the CEO of Tesla Motor Vehicles, Elon Musk, and talked to senior people there to see how we can, as a nation, help electric cars come to India. We already have the Anand Mahindra-led Reva car from Bangalore, which is, I think, still evolving both technologically and becoming more financially a sound proposition. But ideally, I have in my mind to take on 2 or 3 pilot projects where we make the entire city or a town work only on electric cars, bring in charging stations across the
something that the smart cities could do.
Yes, that's a brilliant idea. In fact, I was thinking, and I'm happy to share with you, if we could take up 1 or 2 hill stations and have all the cars parked in a multi-storied car park before they enter the hill station, and have electric cars within the hill station. It's a dream that I have, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to do something about it.
A lot more ideas like this will come forward in Reinvest. So what are we actually looking at in Reinvest? I mean, you have some of the best minds coming here. We're going to discuss some of the best practices. What are we expecting? What are we aiming for?
I think there's a dual objective. One is to learn from experiences of other countries, learn from the participants, the manufacturers, the developers, the investors, what their difficulties are. And within this learning, find practical solutions so that going forward, from these learnings, we can make the whole project far more successful in a faster time scale.
Right.
We are also engaging with the technical experts to see how going forward we can get better technology access into India. We are already working on pilot projects on storage of energy. We are working on solar thermal with IIT Jodhpur.
Right.
The government has a big focus on innovation, research and development.
Right.
And we would welcome international participation in these efforts. That's the idea that this conference
And are
is.
we targeting investments as well through Reinvest? I mean,
Certainly.
the name sounds quite investor friendly.
Yeah, you'll be very happy to know that we have been engaging with investors and companies, both Indian and international, to see what level of interest there is to invest in India.
Sure.
And I do understand that several times the investment interest may not fructify 100%. But I'm happy to tell you we have over twice the amount of plans that we have in terms of commitments from companies who are promising to get into the renewable energy space, to invest in renewable energy. And I'm very delighted that India and Indian corporates and international participants both have evinced such keen interest to come and invest in India. The Honorable Prime Minister is going to recognize and acknowledge the companies and the bankers who have committed to participate in this renewed thrust on renewable energy.
Right.
And I do hope this will be a great encouragement in the next few years for people to come into the renewable investments.
So in the overall energy mix, what's the long-term objective for renewable energy?
India today, if one was to take wind, solar and waste to energy, is about 6% in terms of energy consumed is renewable. So we do 1 trillion units of energy. We're doing about 60 billion units of renewable energy. We believe that in the next 7 or 8 years, India should look at scaling this up to 15%. So when we're looking at energy production or generation going to 2 trillion units, we hope that 300 billion of that will be renewable energy, which is a 5x growth. And that's the type of challenging targets that we have suo moto taken upon ourselves and are working towards.
So when we have these 5x kind of targets, are we ever going to be moving away from high carbon dependent energy?
It will be a gradual process. There are some countries in the world which moved away too rapidly, but are today facing the pain of that. So India will have to calibrate its development imperative and its concerns for climate change, and calibrate and balance both of them and move forward.
So what is the progress on the coal auctions that we are doing?
When we were faced with this challenge after the cancellation of 204 blocks, the government acted proactively. We were able to come out with an ordinance to set the roadmap for reallocating all these coal mines through a completely honest and transparent method within less than a month. And since then, we have set very tight timelines to ensure that coal production in the country does not suffer. And within the 6 months that the Honorable Supreme Court had given the government, by 31st March, our effort is that all the 42 mines which were producing or ready to produce continue to produce and ramp up their production. We have been dot on schedule so far, save give and take 1 or 2 days. And we are very confident that these auctions will set benchmarks of transparency and honesty going forward, as well as expand the production of coal, which is a much needed raw material for adequate power supply to the people of India. I'm very satisfied with what has happened so far. There are a few impediments, some court cases that have been brought to bear, some effort to destabilize this transparent and honest method of allocation. But I'm quite confident that the honorable courts will ensure justice and also help us ensure that the auctions take place in time, in a transparent and fair manner, and help us meet the requirements of end-use plans expeditiously.
And the power supply situation as a result of these, as a result of the auctions, I mean, are they going to be expedited?
Well, after several years of hiatus, where coal production had stagnated, in the last 4 years it barely increased by 1.5% CAGR. We have seen that in the first 8 months of this government, coal production has increased by nearly 8%. Power production has increased in double digits. both of which are very redeeming features, very enthusing for all of us. And I can assure you that this trend will only improve going forward. After these auctions are through, I believe all of these mines will start working to ramp up production, to get into production wherever they are not yet producing. We are, as a government, helping them with an enabling environment so that clearances are faster, approvals are faster. We have also in our mind that Coal India production should ramp up to 1 billion tons. And we want to ensure that going forward, thermal coal imports becomes a thing of the past.
So we are already amongst the fastest growing countries in the world. When we are, by the new GDP estimates, we will be the fastest growing country in the world. So obviously energy is crucial for that, to keep that going.
I can assure you energy will not let the nation down. We will ensure adequate supply of fuel to our power plants, and we'll ensure that people of India get adequate power, affordable power and good quality power.
Well, thanks very much, sir. Thank you very much for talking to Doordarshan News.
Thank you.